Evening and welcome once again to another program of Issues in the News, where we discuss the important events that would have taken place in our country over the past week or so. As usual, I want to use this occasion to welcome our listeners who are joining us on Freedom Radio from Rob Street, Georgetown. And I want to also take this opportunity to welcome our viewers on Facebook who are joining us right across the length and breadth of Guyana, the Caribbean, North America, Europe, and further afield. Welcome once again to another program of Issues in the News. And as you may be aware, today is the 17th day of September 2019, and tomorrow will be the 18th day of September 2019, a significant and tragic day in the calendar of Guyana as a nation state, because on September the 18th, whatever legitimacy, whatever flimsy constitutionality this government of Guyana may have will be removed, and Guyana will be entering into uncharted constitutional waters. Guyana, the government of Guyana, comprising of the president, the prime minister, the vice presidents, and ministers of the government, their tenure in government would have come to an end. And after tomorrow, the government of Guyana, the president of Guyana, the cabinet of Guyana, the vice presidents of Guyana, the ministers of Guyana would all become illegal. They would all become unconstitutional. Their life as a legitimate government would have expired come tomorrow, and no one really knows where this will take us and what are going to be the multiplicity of ramifications which will flow from this. Tonight we will examine some of these ramifications and some of these consequences. But it's important that we retrace briefly how we arrived at this most tragic destination. You would recall that on December the 21st, 2018, a no confidence motion was moved by opposition leader Mr. Bharat Jagdeo in the National Assembly of Guyana. That no confidence motion was voted upon, and the People's Progressive Party, of which Mr. Jagdeo is the General Secretary and of which he is the opposition leader, got 33 out of the 65 votes cast in the National Assembly. And that 33 votes meant that the no confidence motion was successfully passed. And the Constitution of Guyana, which is our supreme law, says that once a no confidence motion is passed, the cabinet, inclusive of the president, shall resign. The government, though defeated, will remain in office until an election is held, and that election must be held within 3 months, and that government will remain in office for that 3 months period unless that 3 months is extended by a 2/3 vote in the National Assembly. But that government will remain in office for that 3 months period unless that extension is granted, until the new president is sworn in. well, it is common ground now that the no confidence motion was validly passed and upheld to be validly passed both by the High Court and the Caribbean Court of Justice, and therefore no one can question the legality of the no confidence motion. However, Cabinet refused to resign. The President has failed to fix a date for the elections within the 3 months period. The National Assembly did not extend the life of the government, and that 3 months period, and the first 3 months period ended on March the 19th, 2019. However, the Caribbean Court of Justice, in the no confidence motion proceedings, said that the legal proceedings challenging the no confidence motion had put the clock on pause for the purpose of computing that 3 months period. So, in deference to that pronouncement, the clock was put on pause, but the CCJ also said that they gave their judgment or their decision on June the 18th, and assuming that that time began to run again from June the 18th, that the further 3 months, assuming that the government got that, would expire on September the 18th, because June, July, August, September the 18th, that 3 months comes to an end. So, whichever interpretation you prefer, from whatever perspective you view the matter from, the conclusion must be that come September the 18th, the life of the government ends, because there is no elections. Yesterday, the President said in an address to the nation, the President, in one of his most sterile, one of his usually sterile and what I call a platitudinous 12 paragraphs of speech, essentially regurgitated what he has been saying for the past several months, that he awaits GCOM to signal its readiness. Now, it is absolute nonsense. The President's position is simply an absurdity, because the Constitution is the supreme law. Everything in this country must bend and bow to the glory of the Constitution. And the Constitution says that the elections must be held within 3 months, or unless that 3 months period is extended by the National Assembly. That did not occur. And we gave them the benefit of the CCJ's interpretation, and that takes them to September the 18th. And that now comes to an end. The President is the one whom the Constitution vests exclusively and solely with the power to issue what is called a proclamation fixing a date for elections when elections are due, or whenever the President wishes to do so. That power is not resided anywhere else but in the presidency. That power is exercised 3 times under the Constitution. One, when the 5-year period comes to an end because the government life is fixed for 5 years. When that 5 year period comes to an end, within 3 months after the expiration of that 5 years, the president must issue that proclamation dissolving the parliament and fixing a date for elections. That is situation number one. Situation number two is if a no confidence motion is passed and there is no extension, a similar period of 3 months is given to the president within which he must issue that proclamation dissolving the parliament and fixing the date for elections. And the third situation is if the president, in the exercise of his own deliberate judgment, decides that he wants to go to an elections early in what is called a snap elections, then the president alone has that power to issue a proclamation dissolving the parliament and fixing that date for elections. That power that the Constitution resides in the president is not dependent upon anything else. Anything else. And that is a constitutional mandate that the president has, which he cannot dilute, which he cannot not obey. But we have a president who thinks, and I know that he knows better, but because he's afraid of the electorate, because he's afraid to go to the polls, he uses GCOM, lack of readiness, as a scapegoat in avoiding the discharge of his constitutional duty. So he says, GCOM is not ready. What you want me to do? Well, in the history of electoral politics in the world, Guyana will be the only country on planet Earth where the Elections Commission and not the head of state that determines when elections are going to be held. Let me repeat that. Guyana will go down in the Guinness Book of World Record as the only country on planet Earth where the Elections Commission and not the head of state decides when elections are going to be held. Guyana is the first country because the head of state of Guyana refuses to discharge his responsibility. And GCOM not being ready is absolute garbage. The president knows that he is instructing his commissioners who are sitting at GCOM to do everything possible to delay the elections, to make GCOM not ready, and therefore to provide him with this idiotic excuse of saying that GCOM is not ready. It is all a conspiracy so that the president can carry out his agenda of hiding from the electorate, from hiding from the Guyanese people, while they continue to do their wickedness at GCOM to compromise the integrity of the elections. That is what they're doing. That is what they want time to do. Don't believe for a moment what the president is saying when he says that he wants credible elections. It is not true. He is buying time so that they can compromise the electoral machinery. They can compromise the lists so that a flawed voters list is eventually produced so that we will not have credible elections. And that is the game that is being played out in Guyana. That is the game. And for the record, let me say that from independence to now, it is an axiomatic fact that Burnham rigged elections in Guyana. There is no doubt about that anymore. Burnham rigged the 1968 elections, he rigged the 1973 elections, and he rigged the 1980 elections. But each of those elections were held on time. At least Burnham had the sense, he had the constitutional knowledge, he had the decency not to allow his government life to expire. Desmond Hoyt rigged the 1985 elections. There is also no doubt about that. But Desmond Hoyt held the 1985 elections on December the 9th, within the constitutionally provided time frame. He did not allow the life of his government to expire. From 1985, 5 years forward would have been 1990. Hoyt recognized that elections were due in 1990. So what the PNC did at that time, as they want to do now, and perhaps are doing now, they caused so much damage to the then list of electors that the elections were delayed for 2 years. But Mr. Hoyt ensured that he got Dr. Jagan to go back to the parliament and extend the life of his government for 2 years. He didn't squat in office. He didn't allow the life of his government to expire. He did not allow the constitutional tenure of his government to expire. He got together with Dr. Chenny Jagan. They went back to the parliament using that very 2/3 majority with the PNC and the PPP combined, and they extended the life of that parliament for a further 2 years and extended the life of the government to 1992 so that the government had legitimacy. So these are heads of state who rigged elections before, but at least they had the modicum of decency to not to allow their governmental lifespan to expire. They extended it. Hoyt extended it when the occasion arose. Fast forward to PPP time. We had elections in 92 and then we had elections in 1997. And then we had elections, so 92 and 5, 97. 97 we were supposed to have elections in 2002, at the end of 2002, because we had elections at the end of 1997. But remember that the 1997 elections were challenged by an elections petition, and the very Justice Claudette Singh cut the then government's life by 2 years and ordered an elections at the end of the election petition. One of the orders that the same Justice Claudette Singh made was that we must have elections within 3 months at that time. 3 months. The PPP was in government. The PPP held the elections within the 3 months and won it again. And the very Elections Commission delivered the elections with only 3 months' notice. With only 3 months' notice. Here, this Elections Commission already have 9 months' notice because the no confidence motion was passed since December. We are now in September and they still cannot have the electoral machinery ready. Then in 2000, after the 2001 elections, we had elections again in 2006. Then we had elections again in 2011. And then they threatened the no confidence motion, and the PPP cut its life again by 2 years and went back to the elections in 2015. Remember, elections were December 2011, so that's almost 2012, 2013, 2014, and by March 2015, we had to go back to elections again in less than 3 years. And the election was held, and the Elections Commission was ready and presented credible elections, which this government won, so they can't say it was not credible elections. And the very list was used. So I say all of that to show you that what is going on here is all a facade and is all shenaniganism. And if the PPP had ever done this, Georgetown would have been burnt to the ground. People would have been killed and beaten. Elections were held on time. The results were certified to be free and fair by all international observers. And I speak of the 92 elections, 97 elections, 2001 elections. And this grouping refused to accept the results. And they burned, and they beat, and they looted, and they destroyed public properties and private properties right across this land. And perhaps the PPP should consider whether it should not have that kind of facility within its political armory. Because if it was capable, if its supporters were so inclined, then we would not have had what is taking place here. So as from tomorrow, the GCOM met today, and obviously nothing of substance has emerged because you're not hearing anything on the news. So another week will go by and GCOM cannot act decisively. The Constitution, which is the supreme law and which is supposed to be guiding everyone and which is supposed to be the one thing that everyone obeys and the document that all are subject to, has become the floor cloth of everybody. So the president wipes his foot or his feet on that floor cloth called the Constitution. And he said, to hell with that document. I don't have to bother with that 3 months. I have to wait until GCOM. And GCOM, which by itself is also subject to the Constitution and must deliver elections within a 3 months period, says, well, I have to look at the list. I have to look at the administrative decisions. I have to look at everything else other than the Constitution. So Claudette Singh now, former Judge Claudette Singh, is also wiping her feet on the Constitution. Keith Lowenfield is wiping his feet on the Constitution. And of course the government commissioners are wiping their feet on the Constitution. So the Constitution has become a glorified foot rag in this country. And the doctrine that says that the Constitution is supreme has become reduced to pure and absolute garbage. And that is where we are now, where our supreme law has become the most disrespected instrument in the land. Nobody, none of the, and that is what the CCJ, and that is where you have constitutional agencies who are not prepared to discharge their constitutional mandate, are responsible for this unfortunate state of affairs. Because if the CCJ had made the decision that we asked them to make, which were order the president to fix a date for elections, order GCOM to have a list ready within 3 months, order cabinet to resign, then we would not have been in this constitutional quagmire in which we are found. But the CCJ decides to take the timid route. It decided to abdicate its responsibility, in my humble view. And it decided to place confidence and trust on the constitutional actors of the day. Well, if what the CCJ, and I don't know how they could not have seen this, if the constitutional players, as the CCJ themselves said, the relevant article of the Constitution is so clear that it required no gloss. It did not require a court to interpret it. Any child capable of reading and functionally literate could have read and can read and comprehend what the relevant article says. The CCJ made that very clear. Well, after they made that very clear, and they should have recognized that if these constitutional players had any integrity in the first place, we would not have had to go to the CCJ to get them to comply with the Constitution. That fundamental reality was lost upon the CCJ. Because had they thought it through, they would have realized that these constitutional actors, whose integrity they were relying upon, were constitutional actors without any integrity, because that is why we reached to the CCJ. That is how we reached there, because they did not display any evidence of integrity in the first place. But the CCJ, in a bout of naivety, in an exhibition of alarming gullibility, said, we are trusting them and we are placing reliance on their integrity, that they will do the right thing. Well, up to now, the right thing has not been done. And what they have succeeded in doing is holding up the CCJ order and making it a mockery. So every time you go to court, the Basil Williams argument is, as unlearned as it is, as uneducated as it is, he repeats it every time. But you went to the highest court already, and they didn't grant you. How can you come to a lower court? You are abusing the process of the lower court. That is the argument he keeps advancing. Because this guy has no shame. Absolutely none. You know, at some point in time, one would expect, after you reach a certain level in your professional pursuit, and especially when you are on a global platform, where the entire world is watching you and is hearing what you are saying or reading what you are saying, one would expect that there would be some exhibition of pride. There would be some kind of anxiety about what people will think when they hear me say these things. But pride, dignity, shame, all these things are absent in this grouping of people. Because they are traveling the world and they are saying these things. The president makes one of the most important addresses to the nation, and it is expressed in less than 12 paragraphs, in which he says nothing of substance. And he doesn't permit the people and the press to ask him a single question. The arrogance, the pomposity, the audacity, the temerity that you are now becoming an illegal government, you are now becoming an illegal president, and you would not even offer your press and your people the dignity of an audience with you. You wouldn't ask a question. You hide behind one camera in the deep recesses of your office and you address the nation. This is the behavior of high-class dictators. Well, not high-class, low-class dictators. Crude dictators. This is vulgar behavior. Vulgar behavior. There's no other way that one can describe this kind of conduct. But let's move on. So tomorrow, we will have an illegal government. And, you know, it is not my intention to blow the PPP's trumpet. And let me make that very clear. But the PPP has been on the political front the only political party that is doing anything to confront what is going on. As a political party, there is no other political party other than the PPP and its supporters who are out in the trenches, out in the streets, in the courts of public opinion, on the social media. The leader of the opposition is always at his press conference. We are always writing in the letter columns of the newspaper. It's just as if the other political parties do not exist. There are smaller parties like ANOG. What are they doing? You have Schuman's party, the Amerindian party. What are they doing of substance? What are they doing? And this struggle is not for the PPP alone. And whenever some people in civil society speak out, and whenever the small parties speak out, they are so duplicitous that they blame the PPP too. They paint both parties with the same brush in an effort to appear independent, in an effort to be aloof. They say that it is the two parties always fighting at each other. And I want to tonight reject that notion. The PPP has done nothing wrong from December to now. All we have been doing is championing the cause of the Constitution, fighting for constitutional compliance, fighting to protect the franchise of the Guyanese people, fighting to protect democracy in this country, fighting to protect the right of the people of this country to vote at the elections when elections are due. That's all that we have been doing. And then you hear somebody would come and say the two parties must change. What nonsense. What has the PPP done wrong? But these are people who lack the courage to speak out against the government. They lack the fortitude. They lack the strength. They lack the depth of character to say that the government is acting illegally and acting unconstitutionally. And even if they muster the courage to do that, they always have a back. They always slap the PPP back. Well, the PPP was doing the same thing. We have never not hold elections when elections are due. We have never violated the Constitution with such flagrance and vulgarity. Never. The private sector is playing a role, and I recognize the private sector for that. I salute them. But look at the Manufacturers Association inviting a president whose tenure just expired to attend some forum to address them. We cannot confront illegality. We cannot fight against unconstitutionality. We can't protect our democracy if we behave like this. This thing has passed the stage of party politics. People don't understand that. What we are dealing here is the very fabric of our society. Is this the fabric of civilization itself? Because if we continue down this road, we are heading into anarchy. We are going to be ostracized by the world. This is the nation state of Guyana, whose future is being threatened. It's not about politics anymore. Every single Guyanese who has any patriotic clinging, who has any nationalistic sentiments endowed in them, must speak out. Must speak out from tomorrow. Because there is nothing that can justify being governed by tyranny. Because these people are going to be tyrants as of tomorrow. They are going to be spending monies illegally, taxpayers' money illegally. They are going to be occupying public offices illegally. They are going to be paying themselves illegally. They are going to be using state assets, all these vehicles that they're driving around illegally. They are going to be hemorrhaging the treasury illegally. They are going to be making decisions illegally. They are going to be representing Guyana illegally. Every contract that they enter into will be illegal. Every decision that they make will be illegal. Look at the religious organizations. I am not seeing the religious organizations coming out. And don't tell me that religious organizations do not get involved in politics. That's absolute nonsense. There's no difference between religion and politics. Which religion would tolerate or permit illegality? Which religion? Hinduism? No. Islam? Certainly not. Christianity? No. Which holy book condones unconstitutional rule? Which holy scripture condones government by force? Condones illegal spending of taxpayers' dollars? Which religious organization embraces those concepts? So the religious organizations have a duty to speak out. The labor movement, unless you speak out, then you are not a labor leader. Because what can happen, what worse can befall the worker when those who are governing his affairs are doing so through tyranny and through misrule and through illegality? Civil society organizations. Where is Transparency International? How can an organization of an international stature like Transparency International remain quiet in a society where the government is illegal? The government life expires and the country is governed by a grouping of tyrants that are basically taking money illegally from the treasury to sustain themselves. And they are governing over a people not by license or constitutionality, but by force. But by force. The police force and the army will have to protect them by force, not by law, not by legal edict. That is what is happening. How can an organization like Transparency International, Amnesty International, the Guyana Human Rights Association, how can they remain quiet? How can they remain quiet in the face of such assault on human rights, human dignity, democracy, constitutionality, and the rule of law? Where are organizations like the Red Thread, Mother in Black? All these organizations, where are they now? Are they in favor of unconstitutional rule? Are they in favor of tyrannical rule? Are they in favor of ruling not by popular support but by imposition? And now I come to the diplomatic community. I am so disappointed. We have so many diplomats in this country. So many countries are represented here. And I am not hearing, I am not seeing their condemnation. As from tomorrow, they cannot remain silent. Because if they remain silent, then it means that their governments, their respective governments, are condoning unconstitutionality, are condoning an assault on democracy, are condoning an assault on the liberty of the people of this country, are condoning an assault on corruption. Because every dollar that will be spent as of tomorrow will be corruption, will be fraudulent. The diplomatic community cannot stay silent. This is not a PPP battle anymore. That is the fundamental point that I want to make. It cannot be a PPP battle anymore. The CARICOM cannot be headquartered here anymore. If it is going to stay silent, as a government, life expires. How can the headquarter of CARICOM operate out of a territory where the entire governmental structure is illegal and unconstitutional? How can CARICOM operate here? What message is CARICOM sending to other countries if it's going to continue its operation in a state where the government is ruling by tyranny, where the government has lost its legality? How can CARICOM continue to function in this society and remain a respectable international organization? How can the IDB continue to have an office in a country and function where the government is illegal, where there is no accountability for public funds, there is no parliament functioning to authorize money from the treasury? How can organizations such as the European Union continue to function in Guyana when the government is illegal, is raping the treasury, there is no parliament, the government is not obeying the law, it is not obeying the constitution, it is not obeying court orders? How can the European Union, an international institution of that stature, continue to operate here? The United Nations has an office here. How can it continue to operate here and remain silent to this onslaught? What is going on here is an international tragedy. And every single person within the territory of this country has a duty to speak out and raise his or her voice against what is going on. As from tomorrow, we are going to have a series of activities. But again, I emphasize and I reiterate that this cannot be, and it will not be, and it must not be a PPP political struggle. It must not be. This is a struggle to bring Guyana, a nation state, back to constitutionality, back to legality, because it's gone off track after tomorrow. It's gone completely off the constitutional track. It's gone outside of the realm of the rule of law, gone outside of legality. I don't know of any other country in the Caribbean or indeed the Commonwealth. I can't think of any other country where the time for holding of elections has come. The government did not get an extension from the parliament to extend the life of the government, but the government continues to remain in office. I don't know of any other government or country where such an occasion or a phenomenon took place. I don't know of any. And that is why lawyers have had great difficulty in explaining what will happen. Because who are holding office in the government should not be holding office. Basil Williams should not sit as the Attorney General. He's not. He is not. When it says that the government remains in office until a new president is sworn in, the government remains in office for a 3-month period. It also says that the elections must be held within 3 months. So when you read Article 106 and 106.7, you can't read half and ignore the other half. The article must be read as a whole. So when they are arguing that the government remains in office until another president is sworn in, the president is to be sworn in by virtue of an election which shall be held within 3 months. You can't read that part and forget it. So it's a complete formula that the framers of the Constitution crafted in that way. So I don't know if Venezuela decides tomorrow to take advantage of a vacuum, because that is what is going to be created. There will be no executive. The Constitution has 3 forms of government, 3 branches of government, so to speak. You have the judiciary. You don't have parliament, because parliamentary tenure comes to an end after the 3 months. Because when the National Assembly voted in favor of that no confidence motion, Parliament automatically only had 3 months after that. Because that Parliament has lost confidence in the government. That is what it means. It is that Parliament that has lost confidence in the government. And therefore that government got to now wrap up. The Parliament is closed down unless we go back and extend it by a 2/3 majority. And you can't do it now because you had within the 3 months to have done so. You cannot go and do it now. So there is no Parliament, there is no legislature. There is no executive anymore. The only functioning branch of government in Guyana now is the judiciary. The executive life has expired, Parliament life has expired, and the only branch of government that you have is the judiciary. Guyana is now truly going to be in a constitutional crisis. Mr. Granger is no longer the commander-in-chief of the armed forces as of the end of tomorrow. He is no longer the commander-in-chief. The army owes allegiance. They took an oath to respect the Constitution of Guyana. Every public officer swears to uphold the Constitution of Guyana must listen to the oath. Go at the back, look at any one of the oaths that every constitutional office holder, be it the judges, be it the magistrates, be it the ministers of the government, be it the commissioner of police, the head of the army, the head of the public service, each permanent secretary, when they take that oath, they take an oath to uphold the Constitution. They do not take an oath to be loyal to government. So if the Constitution says that this government is illegal because constitutional life has come to an end, then the army doesn't have to look at the president anymore. They don't owe an allegiance to him. He is no longer the commander-in-chief. That is what the Constitution says. The judges, they took an oath to uphold the office, the Constitution. And they know more than all of us that the life of the government has expired. Permanent secretaries and public officers are no longer required to take directions from the government because their allegiance lies to the Constitution which they have to uphold. And this government has lost constitutionality. So we are in a very volatile situation, and nobody in the government, either they have not the ability to appreciate the implications, they care not to consider the implications, or I've never seen anything like this anywhere else in the world. Never seen anything else like this. Never seen a government allow itself to reach in this kind of abyss. I don't know how we come out of this. Because after tomorrow, it is not clear. Really, the president technically cannot issue a proclamation even to fix a date for elections because he is not the president. I repeat so that you understand the level of crisis that they have put us in. Mr. David Granger, after September the 18th, is no longer qualified to dissolve the parliament. He is no longer qualified to issue a proclamation fixing a date for election because he is not the president. His tenure as president has come to an end. That is what is meant by a constitutional crisis. And that is where we are. And this government has put us in this state of confusion and possibly anarchy. And they have no idea how to take us out. They have no idea how to take us out. The diplomatic community will have to be properly advised, and I don't know what kind of efforts will have to be made and how it is that we will be restored back to constitutionality and legality. It can't happen just like that. The Constitution doesn't provide for a period where the government can remain in office beyond its tenure. There is no such provision in the Constitution. So there is no fallback position, so to speak. There is no reserve to which one can resort to plug back life into the government. So we are really in serious crisis, and it is not sure how we are going to come out of it. And we have border disputes with a country whose stability is not certain and whose behavioral pattern has not been in accordance with international acceptable conduct. And you don't know whether they can take advantage of this hiatus. I don't know how to describe what we are. This vacuum. I used that word earlier. Suppose they use that now as the occasion to come into the country and take what they are claiming as their part. We are going to be at our weakest. The international companies that are here, Tullow and ExxonMobil and all these international companies who are here, they will have to get legal advice on how they interact with the government as from tomorrow. And I know that they have good legal facilities available to them. So my humble and respectful suggestion is that they should really get legal advice. In fact, everyone who is transacting business or who are transacting business with this government as of September the 18th should seek legal advice on how they should proceed. Because how do you know that the agreement that you have entered into, the decisions that have been made which are in your favor or against you, are enforceable? How do you know that? Basic elementary law will tell you that you can't enter into a contract with a party who has no capacity to contract. So you can't enter into a contract with a minor or a non-person, meaning a person who the law does not recognize. Well, the law does not recognize this government as of September the 18th. So is your contract valid? A contract is only enforceable if it is entered into by parties who are recognized as having personality in law. A limited liability company, a statutory body corporate, a human being who is over 18 years old, or a validly elected government who is acting within a constitutional tenure. Not an illegal government. So every contract, every transaction that will be entered into after tomorrow will smack of some form of of illegality or its authenticity or its validity is subject to legal challenge. Whether we like it or not, that is the reality. And every person who has entered into the contract, into a contract with this government, can rely on that illegality to get themselves out of it if they wish. And the government can do the same thing too. Say at the time I did it, I was not legal. So And what I'm speaking about is merely the tip of the iceberg. There are so many different things that are going to unfold over the next few days, which will require our discussions and which will highlight the chaos to which we will catapult come September the 18th. That we will be having this conversation a lot. And we will be having a lot of court cases. A lot of court cases. Because perhaps it's the judiciary that we may have to turn to bring Guyana back to some degree of constitutionality, because as I said, it is the only organ of government that has some degree of legality still left. There is no parliament, there is no executive. All have expired. Both have expired. Only the judiciary left. So we may have to go to the judiciary for directions. And that may take us all the way to the CCJ, which I don't know, the government will stay in office again and capitalize upon that opportunity, because that's what they're doing. So I am sorry that I have to end on this note, because I don't know what else to say. We are approaching a conundrum in our country that has never been experienced before. There is no body or set of laws to which one can turn for guidance. There is no book written about what happens to a government when it becomes illegal, so that we can go to that book for reference or guidance. None. We are in uncharted waters. That's all I can say. And how we navigate out of it, we will have to continue to have these discussions, and some kind of approach will have to be found. But what is sure is that Guyana is unfortunately in deep trouble, in deep crisis, in deep turmoil as of September 18th. This is where I have to say good night. I think that we have had a good discussion. Unfortunately, I have been unable to take the calls. The operator is signaling to me that I have come to the end of my time. So until we meet again, please enjoy the rest of the week, and we will join each other for more discussions as the days come in the next week or so. So please enjoy the rest of this week. Good evening. Take care. Until next week. Thank you.